Let's start with your injuries and illness problems, Paul. What are your new ones?
Paddy McCaughlin's had an injection, been having problems with his sort of hip and his groin. It's been ongoing for quite a while, but managed to get through it. But he'll be missing at the weekend. Hopefully I'll have him back for Dartford, but we'll have to see how he gets on Monday training. Other than that, I'll have it looks like we'll have a fully fit squad to choose from.
Paul Bignett and Scott Nielsen were missing, weren't they, for the last match? Will they be back involved in the squad? That'll come obviously Saturday when I make my decision. You know, as always, just said to the players there, training is a chance to impress, and while you know it is what matters and what happens on a Saturday, I've had enough sort of performances and when we've changed things around where players have come in and done well and then perhaps had to sit out so that they've done well previous. So sometimes I do look closer at training as well to see who I think's physically right and not on the game, who maybe is looking a bit tired. But they certainly come into contention in terms of, you know, it was just a case of changing things around last week. It wasn't because of a bad performance or anything like that. Omar scored on his full debut, didn't he? Has he done enough to keep his place?
Again, another tough decision. He did very well, but realistically I only dropped, well, not dropped, that's not the right word, but Ross came out of the team on the bench for me to have an opportunity to watch Omar, try and get him minutes under his belt, which he did, and to get an assist and the goal was a bonus. So that's again another tough decision, because I thought Ross was outstanding at Cambridge, although he didn't get on the score sheet. So I've got a few tough decisions to make in truth, but I'd rather have that and players available to me and people on form than struggling and trying to pick a team out of players that are low on confidence.
Have you made your mind up then which way you're going to go up front?
No, not yet. I'll look at training tomorrow. You know, I got me sort of inkling one way, but it won't be finalised until, you know, I even Friday nights in general I like to sleep on it, and then look at Saturday, and that's what a lot of the time I don't name the team. So, you know, there's been occasions when people's been ill on a Friday and things like that, and I think if you're told you're not in the team, you can perhaps just get into a bit of a wrong mindset, perhaps. That's the way I do it. Other people, certainly a lot of teams name the team, prior to Saturday, but that's how I like to work.
Is the left back position another dilemma for you?
Yeah, Jamal coming in and had a couple of games. As I said, I didn't, particularly done that bad, but just things seem to be going against him. But he's had a couple of games out. So yeah, another position. I think we could go right across the pitch. Look at right back. Sam Matton came in last week and did well. Chris Doig's there ready to go in. Cookie came on and scored. So these decisions, pretty much all over.
Has that competition for places perked your players up in training?
I'd say so, up until this morning. No, well, generally yes. I think we're getting we have done a lot, to be fair, but I think one or two are just realising they need to be at it, and a bit like what I just said on the training ground as well. You can't just turn up on a Saturday and then think they can have sort of the week off and then turn up on Saturday again. And that's what I've just stressed yet again to them as a group, that I need them at it, each day. I accept some days will be better than others for each player, but I want the right attitude on the training ground, and for the majority of the season we've certainly had that.
Loan window about to reopen, are you likely to do anything or not?
No, I don't think so. I think, talking about the dilemmas I've got there, that's perhaps I don't really want to add to that at this current time. If we pick up injuries, then that's obviously something I'd look at, but at the minute I think we've got the flexibility within the squad and the numbers to cope with that.
This Southport match starts the cycle of Saturday, Tuesday matches for 8 of the next 10 weeks. What sort of shape do you feel you're going into this period in?
Pretty good shape in terms of the injuries that we just spoke about. Hopefully Paddy will be back and got that fully fit squad to choose from. There's no doubt there will be changes to the team. How many and for what reasons will remain to be seen. but we will certainly need the squad. It's a tough schedule, one that's in the main been brought along by his success in the Cups. We've only had 2 games sort of called off, so it's a busy end. That can be fine if we're going along well and we keep the majority of the players fit. Then I think they'll look forward to the challenge. It's better to play games than it is to train, particularly if you're being successful. So hopefully we can be and embrace the run rather than worry about it and sort of talk about fatigue before it's it actually occurred.
So is it an attitude thing as well as sort of a physical one, really? And from that point of view, if so, do you need to speak to your players about that?
I think it is an attitude thing, and I think perhaps I speak to the players anyway in terms of, like, as I said, about all going to be involved and making sure they're right. They might not be in the team currently, but there's a chance that it could well be. But maybe on my side a little bit is just to look at what messages I'm sending out sometimes in terms of what we do in training or interviews like this, where we talk about you can't get away from the schedule. It's there for everyone to see. They go online or they're looking at who we're playing next week, so that they're fully aware of that. But we don't perhaps need to sort of bang on about tiredness kicking in perhaps as we move along. Because as I said, if I feel that that's happening, then I'll just have to freshen the team up and change things around.
Interesting you should say that, Paul. When you were going through your coaching badges, is that one thing that's mentioned to you when you talk to the media, the sort of messages that you send out? And I just wonder whether managers up and down the country are also drilled in that same way.
It was a little bit touched on, not so much the messages going out of the media and so on, but just as in how you can sort of influence the group at times. I am someone that certainly thinks about what's being said, and said in the past sometimes I think guilty of being too honest in terms of certainly what I said to you guys is nothing different than what I've told the players. I don't believe in going in the dressing room, sort of shutting the door behind and then getting a message out to you that they haven't heard themselves already. But it is important that as I say, we together meet this challenge head on. I think higher up you go, perhaps they do have media training and so on. I've obviously had the course. It's not really about this side of it, but certainly sometimes as a player in the past you have it where you perhaps get upset with something you've read from what the manager's said, and I'm not saying that's never happened here, because it's never nice if you read something that's negative, but as I said, they certainly know how I feel, and it won't be a surprise if it's something because they've already heard it.
Have you had to develop a thicker skin whilst you've been in management, or is that just the way you are as a person?
I think I'm quite resilient. My character anyway, I would say. Maybe it's from being sort of 5'5.5".
Don't forget the half.
Yes, it's important. Perhaps I'm losing now, I'm getting old. But no, you certain challenges are against you, and you have a choice. You either meet them or you let things get the better of you. And I again, in terms of a player, hardly missed a day's training. Little knocks and things, I got on with it. I didn't want to be in the physio room or in the gym.
Privately though, do you sometimes let it get to you?
I think of course are going to get to you from time to time. Said before, again, when playing I took the game home with me. Managers certainly no different, because you've got 11 lads, 14 lads, and then the lads that perhaps haven't been involved that you see and you realise that they've sort of upset with you for not being involved, and you've got all that to consider, all that to plan, but you learn to manage with that, and for me, like you keep going back to, honesty is a big thing with the group, with myself. I can go home and sleep at night then, and the players, while they may not agree with what I say to them, I'll give them the reasons why they're not in the team or why they are in the team. And then hopefully together there's a respect there, yeah, you know, as I said, even if there is perhaps a difference of opinion.
Thanks for the insight there, that was interesting. What about the run then that's ahead and the fixtures that are coming up? Do you have fears that it will threaten success this season?
It can always be a fear in the back of your mind, but sometimes that could be, you know, the fear that you're not playing enough, or you can worry about losing players if you haven't got a big squad, and you know, there's numerous things that you could lose sleep over if you want to. I think until we're in a position where, you know, perhaps I was down to the bare bones, and you know, these games are really biting. As I said, we'll meet the challenge, and we've been relatively successful so far. The most successful team in terms of cup competitions in our league, went as far as anyone in the FA Cup, still in the trophy. Third, I think, best team in terms of, I think, points per games in the league. So a lot to be positive about. You know, let's try and carry that on and see how many points we can get.
Southport have Richard Brodie in their squad. How do you reflect on his time at the club?
I think we spoke about it before. You know, I didn't have a problem with Richard. I think he didn't have his best spell on the pitch, and he wanted to play more, and we were obviously changing things around. Didn't work out. You know, we came up against him at Gateshead. He started the game well and sort of faded out. His time there has been pretty short-lived. Went to Hereford and then now at Southport. I'm sure that he'll be keen to put one over on us and get on the score sheet, because he obviously there was some bad press, and I said before, you know, I read a comment that he'd made about a fallout, which to this day I you know, reiterate, it wasn't a genuine argument or fallout. It was a decision made by us that was for the good of the group, you know, and stand by that. It wasn't a fallout. There was no hard feelings between us. You know, for me, that was one that was in his head, unfortunately.
With 2 games against relegation threatened clubs in the next 2 matches, what do you expect points return wise?
I'd like 6. Do I expect 6? No, I don't think you do that. You have to respect the opposition, and as you said, they need the points for different reasons, and sometimes they're the harder games because they'll fight and scratch for everything and make you earn your victory, as it always should be. So there's no doubt on paper they're good games, but you know, if we looked at the trophy and we were looking at the draw and so on, and I think we'd all, or a lot of people would have said, you know, probably Aldershot will win. You know, and then they go there, man sent off admittedly, but get dumped out of the competition. Football's not straightforward, said that before, and certainly not played out on paper. So we need to be at it, and certainly what I don't want, and I've said to the players, I don't want any thoughts turning to semi-final at Cambridge. You know, the thoughts are, if that does come into your head, is you want to be in that team, to give yourself a good chance of it at least, is to perform in these 2 games if you get the shirt.
How would you feel about a final against either Gosport or Havant?
I'll be pleased, because it means we're there, and we all know how difficult that's going to be with Cambridge as semi-final opponents, where we've had 2 excellent games in the league and both come out the better side of one of the results. So I'd be pleased. In terms of for the competition, is it what the FA would have wanted? I don't know. I guess what it does show is that when you enter it, you don't have to be one of the big names to really get there, and Havant and Gosport have deserved you know, to be in the semi-final, the chance to get to the final. They've won their games, beat opposition that's been put in front of them. So, you know, good luck to them, and if we can manage to get there, we will have to respect them, because your name's not on it until, you know, that final whistle goes and you've won the game.
And a thought or two on Dartford on Tuesday. What sort of place is that like to try and get a result?
We went there in the trophy, didn't we? It's the second leg, a little bit different because we had the 3-goal cushion, so it was just important that we didn't concede too early and let them get a head of steam up, and we saw that game out pretty well, and then went and won there in the league with a good performance. When I think defensively that night we had to make a few changes, and we're probably down to bare bones in terms of that. So it's not easy. I think they have brought a couple of lads in from Luton, a couple of loans, signed Mikel Suarez that we had at Boston, who at 6'5" is certainly, if the ball's in the box, is a handful. So again, that'll be tough. They had a good draw against Cambridge recently, but it's a nice ground there. I think the pitch will be heavy because of the weather they're having down there, but they're another team that are going to be fighting for the points.
What are the biggest challenges posed by matches like this against struggling teams?
I don't know, because I guess she's maybe asking, is it about mentality? That's obviously one side. I said the focus needs to be on each game that's approaching and not the following one. But again, you have to look at the opposition and have they got something to play for? Are they going to scrap and fight? And they, those teams, I'm sure they will. The ideal scenario is that you can get yourself a couple of goals up and perhaps you lose a bit of heart, but that's a lot easier said than done.
How do you think you've done against strugglers, generally speaking, this season?
I haven't particularly looked into it in terms of that stat. It seems to me, since I've been here, we've been accused of beating the lower teams, not performing against the better teams. Then you beat the better teams and you can't beat the lower teams. And yet we seem to, certainly last year and this year, we're in the top 5, or have been. I know we just dropped out, so it can't be that bad whichever way around it is. I've heard we don't perform in front of crowds. I think that's now people have said we can. So I don't know, maybe you've got a stat for me that says we haven't done well, but I don't know. Like I say, what I do know is we haven't lost too many games in a long time, and we'll be trying to continue that form.